Let's just say the Earth only had one country. Right now, there are 195 countries on Earth. Some of them get along, most of them sort of tolerate each other. A few of them have been arguing about the same strip of land for so long that nobody involved can remember what started it, which has never once stopped them from continuing. There are 195 different governments, 195 different sets of laws, 195 different tax systems, and somewhere in the region of 7,000 languages being spoken at any given time. The European Union alone has 24 official languages, which means every document has to be translated 24 times, which employs a truly staggering number of translators. Brussels is basically a city powered by people who know how to say agricultural subsidy in Estonian. But let's just say none of that existed. Let's say there was only ever one country, not that we unified last year after some inspiring speech at the United Nations, that there was never more than one. From the very beginning, every human being on Earth lived in a single nation. One government, one set of laws, one flag. We'll call it what it is, Earth. The first question is how this would even happen, because in our world, the entire reason we have 195 countries is geography. Mountains, oceans, deserts, rivers, these are the things that separate people. The Himalayas split South and East Asia. The Sahara separates North Africa from Sub-Saharan Africa. The Atlantic kept the Americas and Europe ignorant of each other for thousands of years. When groups of humans are separated by a physical barrier for long enough, they develop different languages, different customs. Eventually, they draw a line and say, this side is ours. That's a country. For Earth to have only one country, you need to remove those barriers. Or, more interestingly, you need humans to have never cared about them. Let's go with that. Let's say humans, for whatever evolutionary reason, never developed strong tribal instincts. No in-groups and out-groups. No us and them. Just us. From the very first settlements in Mesopotamia to today, every human identified as a citizen of the same place. This changes everything. And I mean everything. Let's start with language, because it's the first domino. In our world, languages diverge because populations separate. A group of Latin speakers splits into isolated communities across Europe. And after 1,000 years, you've got French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian, all of which started as the same language and are now mutually unintelligible enough that ordering coffee in the wrong one gets you a confused look. In a single country world, there'd be no reason for languages to split that dramatically. There'd still be dialects and regional variation, the same way English sounds different in London, Texas, and Melbourne. But there'd be one root language, maintained by a single continuous culture. Everyone on Earth would be able to understand everyone else, maybe not perfectly. The person in coastal West Africa and the person in northern Siberia might sound about as different as a Glaswegian and a Texan do to each other, but they'd manage. The implications of this are enormous. Right now, language barriers are one of the biggest obstacles to global cooperation. Scientific research is published in dozens of languages. Trade negotiations require armies of interpreters. Tourists point at menus and hope for the best. In a single language world, all of that friction disappears. Every scientific paper is immediately readable by every scientist. Every book is written for the entire world's audience. Every joke lands. Well, in theory. Now let's talk about war, because that's the big one. In our world, the vast majority of wars are fought between countries. Two nations disagree about a border, a resource, an ideology, or sometimes just because their leaders don't like each other. War requires an enemy. And in our world, the easiest way to define an enemy is to draw a line on a map and declare everyone on the other side of it a threat. In a one-country world, there is no other side of the line. There is no foreign enemy. There are no border disputes because there are no borders. No invasions because there's nothing to invade. No arms races between rival nations because there are no rival nations. This does not mean there would be no violence. I want to be very clear about that. Civil wars, rebellions, local conflicts, crime, all of these would still exist. Humans are still humans. But the kind of large-scale, industrialized, nation versus nation warfare that defined the 20th century and killed roughly 100 million people, that specific thing probably wouldn't happen. You'd never have a world war because the world is already on the same team. You'd have regional uprisings, power struggles, and political violence. But you probably wouldn't have trenches stretching across France or nuclear arsenals pointed at cities on the other side of the planet, which means a lot of technology never gets invented, or at least not when it did. The internet was originally a military project. ARPANET was built by the US Department of Defense in the late 1960s as a communication network that could survive a nuclear attack. No Cold War, no ARPANET, maybe no internet, at least not in the form we know it. Radar was developed because Britain needed to detect incoming German bombers. Jet engines were accelerated by the arms race between the Allies and the Axis powers. Nuclear energy exists because we built nuclear bombs first. GPS was a military navigation system before it was a way to find the nearest pizza. Duct tape was invented to seal ammunition cases. War is, unfortunately, an extraordinary engine for technological innovation. When two nations are trying to destroy each other, they pour unimaginable resources into research and development. The urgency of build this or we all die produces results that peacetime funding simply can't match. In a one-country world, that urgency doesn't exist. Technology would still advance, but it would advance at the pace of curiosity and commerce, not survival. Which is to say, slower, we might have better philosophy and worse rockets. Now, the economy, this is where it gets really interesting. Right now, global trade is a mess. Tariffs, sanctions, embargoes, trade agreements, import quotas. Every country is trying to protect its own economy while accessing everyone else's. The amount of human effort spent negotiating, enforcing, and circumventing trade barriers is genuinely difficult to calculate, but it's a lot. It's a really enormous lot. In a one-country world, all of that vanishes. There's one economy, one currency. No tariffs because there's nobody to tariff. No sanctions because you can't sanction yourself. Resources flow to wherever they're needed most, at least in theory, because there are no national interests getting in the way. This sounds utopian, and in some ways it would be, but it creates a new problem: regional inequality, and nobody to blame but yourself. In our world, when a region is poor, it's easy to point at external factors: colonialism, trade exploitation, sanctions, foreign interference. In a one-country world, there's no external. There's no them keeping us down. If a region is impoverished, it's because the single global government either neglected it, chose to prioritize somewhere else, or failed to distribute resources fairly. The political pressure this creates would be immense. Every regional grievance is a domestic issue. Every drought in sub-Saharan Africa, every factory closure in the Rust Belt, every housing crisis in coastal cities, all of it lands on the same government's desk. Governing a single global nation of 8 billion people would be, to use a technical term, an absolute nightmare. The largest country by population right now is India at about 1.4 billion. Governing India is already extraordinarily complex. It has 22 official languages, dozens of major ethnic groups, 6 major religions, and a political system that has to balance the interests of over 1 billion people spread across a subcontinent. Scaling that up to 8 billion people spread across every climate zone on Earth is not just harder, it's a fundamentally different problem. You'd need layers, lots of layers, regional governments with significant autonomy, probably organized along geographic lines. A tropical coastal region has different needs than an Arctic interior. You can't run both with the same policies any more than you can dress for both with the same wardrobe. The global government would handle things like resource distribution, infrastructure, and large-scale planning, while regional bodies would handle local governance. Think of it like the European Union, but for the entire planet, and with actual teeth. Democracy at this scale would be fascinating. In our world, the largest democratic election is India's general election, which involves about 900 million eligible voters and takes over a month to complete. A global election with 5 or 6 billion eligible voters would be the single largest logistical operation in human history every time it happened. The campaign alone would take years. Candidates would need to appeal to voters in the Amazon and voters in Siberia simultaneously, which is a messaging challenge I do not envy. Now, something most people wouldn't think about: space exploration. In our world, the space race happened because the United States and the Soviet Union wanted to prove which system was better by getting to the moon first. The entire Apollo program, one of humanity's greatest achievements, was essentially a very expensive, very patriotic flex. Without rival nations, there's no one to race against. No Sputnik moment. No "we choose to go to the moon" speech, because the "we" already includes everyone and there's nobody to impress. Space exploration would still happen eventually. Curiosity is a human trait, not a national one. But it would happen on the timeline of scientific interest and economic incentive, not geopolitical competition. We might not reach the moon until the 2000s. We might not have satellites until the 2020s. Or we might get there faster because the entire planet's research budget is pooled into one space program instead of being split across NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, CNESA, ISRO, and a dozen others, all of whom are duplicating each other's work. Actually, that's worth thinking about. In our world, there are hundreds of space agencies, thousands of universities, and millions of researchers, all working on overlapping problems in isolation from each other, often rediscovering things that someone on the other side of a border already figured out. In a one-country world, that duplication disappears. One global research network. Every scientist can access every other scientist's data. Every breakthrough is immediately available to everyone. The efficiency gains would be extraordinary. We'd probably cure diseases faster. We'd solve engineering problems faster. We'd understand the climate better, which is particularly relevant because in a one-country world, climate change isn't a negotiation between 195 nations with conflicting interests. It's a domestic policy issue. One government decides to reduce emissions, and it happens. No Paris Agreement, no arguments about who should cut how much, just a decision implemented globally by the only government there is. That said, a single global government with no external checks on its power is a terrifying prospect. In our world, when one country becomes authoritarian, its citizens can flee to another. Refugees cross borders, political dissidents seek asylum. There's always somewhere else to go. In a one-country world, there is no somewhere else. If the global government turns oppressive, there's no escape, no border to cross, no friendly nation to take you in. You're stuck. The entire history of political freedom depends, to some extent, on the existence of alternatives. The Pilgrims left England for America. Einstein left Germany for the United States. Dissidents have always been able to vote with their feet, as long as there were feet-friendly destinations. Remove all alternatives, and the stakes of governance become absolute. Get it right, and you have paradise. Get it wrong, and there is nowhere on the planet to hide from it. This is, I think, the central tension of a one-country world. The potential is extraordinary. No war between nations, no trade barriers, no duplicated research, no refugee crises caused by one country destroying what another country built. The problems that consume the majority of our diplomatic energy simply don't exist. But the risk is equally extraordinary. One government, accountable to no one external, with authority over every human being alive. History suggests that unchecked power corrupts. It suggests this repeatedly and loudly. A global government that worked well would be the greatest achievement in human history. A global government that worked badly would be the last achievement in human history, because there'd be nobody left to try something different. So maybe the answer to what if there was only one country isn't really about politics or economics or technology. Maybe it's about a question that we've been arguing about for the entire duration of human civilization and have never come close to settling. Can we trust ourselves with that much power? Historically, the answer has been no. But then again, historically, we've never had the chance to find out what we could do if we actually worked together. All 8 billion of us, same team, same flag, same country, same chance to get it right.